Your mind is a compass. Focus sharpens the needle, pointing you toward productivity and success. The power of focus. How to get your brain to focus and boost productivity. Introduction: the attention crisis. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of focus and attention. Before we begin, I want you to try something. Take a deep breath, close your eyes for just 5 seconds, and notice how difficult it is to keep your mind from wandering. Did you make it the full 5 seconds without a thought pulling you away? For most people living in today's world, this simple exercise reveals just how fragmented our attention has become. We're living through what I call an attention crisis. Never before in human history have we faced such relentless competition for our mental focus. The average person now consumes about 5 times more information daily than they did in 1986. We check our phones an astonishing 150 times per day. That's roughly once every 6 minutes of our waking lives. The typical office worker checks email 74 times daily and uses instant messaging 77 times, all while being interrupted by colleagues, notifications, and the digital world's endless stream of content. The consequences of this fragmented attention extend far beyond just feeling busy or distracted. They affect our productivity, creativity, relationships, and even our sense of meaning and purpose. When we can't focus, we can't think deeply. When we can't think deeply, we struggle to solve complex problems, generate innovative ideas, or experience the flow states that make work fulfilling. But here's the good news. Focus is not a fixed trait. It's a skill, one that can be developed, strengthened, and recovered even after years of digital distraction. And that's exactly what this audiobook is about. Over the next 5 chapters, I'll share what I've learned from years of research into attention, from experiments I've conducted on myself, and from the latest neuroscience about how our brains process information and maintain focus. More importantly, I'll provide practical, actionable strategies that you can implement immediately to reclaim your attention and harness the incredible power of focused thought. This isn't about digital minimalism or rejecting technology entirely. It's about developing a healthier, more intentional relationship with our devices and our attention. One that allows us to use technology as a tool rather than being used by it. By the end of this audiobook, you'll understand why focus has become so elusive in the modern world, how your brain's attention systems actually work, and what specific practices can help you strengthen your ability to concentrate, think creatively, and work productively in a distraction-filled environment. The journey to better focus begins with awareness, so let's start by examining the nature of our distracted minds and why they've become that way. Chapter 1. Understanding our distracted mind. Welcome to The Power of Focus. I'm excited to take you on a journey to reclaim your attention in a world designed to steal it. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you spent an entire hour focused on just one task, without checking your phone, responding to a notification, or switching to another activity? For most of us, that's a difficult question to answer. If you're like most people, you might struggle to remember such a moment in recent memory. Our modern lives have become a symphony of screens. We wake to the glow of our smartphones, work in front of computers, relax with tablets, and fall asleep to the blue light of our devices. This constant digital engagement isn't just changing our habits. It's rewiring our brains at a fundamental level, altering how we think, process information, and relate to the world around us. I discovered this firsthand when I noticed my own troubling pattern. From the moment I woke up until I closed my eyes at night, I bounced between screens like a digital pinball. My morning routine consisted of checking emails before my feet hit the floor. My workday was fragmented by constant notifications. Even my downtime was filled with mindless scrolling through social media feeds designed by teams of engineers to keep me engaged for as long as possible. My smartphone was the worst offender, a pocket-sized distraction machine that consumed hours of my day in small, seemingly harmless increments. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. These moments didn't feel significant in isolation, but when I actually tracked my usage, I was shocked to discover I was spending over 4 hours daily on my phone. That's 60 full days per year, 2 entire months of my life, staring at a small glowing rectangle. This realization led me to a radical experiment, limiting my smartphone use to just 30 minutes per day for an entire month. No exceptions, no cheating. Those 30 minutes had to cover everything: navigation, calls, messages, music, and any app I might want to use. I set a timer each time I picked up my phone, and when my daily allowance was gone, the phone went into a drawer until the next day. The first week was surprisingly difficult, more difficult than I had anticipated. I felt phantom vibrations in my pocket, reaching for a phone that wasn't there. I grabbed for my device dozens of times a day out of pure habit, my hand moving almost independently of my conscious mind. I experienced genuine anxiety when passing time in waiting rooms or standing in lines without digital entertainment. I found myself feeling irritable, restless, and even experiencing something akin to withdrawal symptoms. Friends and family noticed the change immediately. "Are you okay?" they'd ask when I didn't immediately respond to messages. Colleagues were confused when I didn't engage in the usual back and forth email chains throughout the day. I had to explain my experiment repeatedly, often receiving skeptical looks or concerned questions about whether I was going through some kind of personal crisis. But then something remarkable happened. After about 8 days, my brain began to adapt. The constant craving for digital stimulation started to fade, and 3 significant changes emerged. First, my ability to concentrate dramatically improved. Tasks that previously required immense willpower to complete now felt manageable. I could read for extended periods without my mind wandering to check notifications. I could engage deeply in conversations without the urge to glance at my phone. I could work through complex problems with greater ease, maintaining my train of thought for hours rather than minutes. It wasn't that focusing became effortless. It was that the constant pull toward distraction had weakened substantially. Second, ideas began to surface more frequently. My mind, no longer constantly occupied with processing digital inputs, had space to make new connections and generate insights. I found myself having those shower thoughts, those moments of clarity or creativity that seem to arise when our minds are slightly unfocused but not actively distracted. I started carrying a small notebook because ideas would bubble up at unexpected moments, while walking, washing dishes, or just sitting quietly with a cup of tea. Third, I found myself thinking about the future more often and more constructively. Rather than reacting to the immediate demands of my devices, I was planning, dreaming, and setting intentions. I began to consider longer-term goals and projects that had been pushed aside by the tyranny of the urgent. My thinking expanded beyond the next notification or the next day to weeks, months, and years ahead. This forward-looking perspective brought a sense of purpose and direction that had been missing in my reactive, device-driven existence. These observations sparked my curiosity. What exactly happens to our brains when we're constantly stimulated by technology? Why does reducing this stimulation seem to enhance our mental capabilities? And most importantly, how can we harness these insights to live more focused, creative, and purposeful lives? I began to research these questions obsessively. I read hundreds of scientific papers on attention, distraction, and cognitive performance. I interviewed neuroscientists, psychologists, and productivity experts. I experimented with various techniques and strategies for managing attention. And I discovered that what I had experienced personally was backed by robust scientific evidence. The answers to these questions form the foundation of this audiobook. By understanding the mechanics of attention, we can develop strategies to strengthen it, just as we might train a muscle. And with stronger attention comes greater productivity, creativity, and ultimately a more meaningful life. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore the science behind focus, discover the surprising power of boredom, learn how to use scatter focus as a tool for creativity, and develop practical techniques to reclaim our attention from the devices and systems designed to capture it. We'll examine how companies deliberately design products to hijack our attention and how we can defend ourselves against these sophisticated techniques. Our journey begins with understanding why focus has become so elusive in the modern world, and what's really happening in our brains when we can't seem to concentrate. Because once we understand the problem at its root, we can begin to develop effective solutions. Chapter 2. The Science of Attention. To understand why focus has become so difficult, we need to look at what's happening inside our brains when we interact with technology. The science of attention reveals insights that are both alarming and empowering. Alarming because they show how profoundly our cognitive abilities are being undermined, but empowering because understanding these mechanisms gives us the knowledge to reclaim our mental faculties. Let's start with some sobering research. A study from Gloria Mark at the University of California found that when sitting at a computer with a smartphone nearby, we typically focus on a single task for only about 40 seconds before switching to something else. When communication tools like Slack or instant messaging are active, this drops to roughly 35 seconds. That's less than a minute of sustained attention before our focus fractures. For comparison, in the early 2000s, before smartphones became ubiquitous, that average was 2.5 minutes. Still short, but more than 3 times longer than today. Another study from Microsoft revealed that since the year 2000, the average human attention span has decreased from 12 seconds to just 8 seconds, which is reportedly shorter than that of a goldfish. While we should take this particular comparison with a grain of salt, the downward trend is clear and concerning. But here's the crucial insight that changed my understanding of the problem. The issue isn't simply that we're being distracted. That's just a symptom. The real issue runs deeper. Our brains have become chronically overstimulated, and this overstimulation creates a state where we actually crave distraction. To understand why, we need to look at how our brains evolved. The human brain developed in an environment where stimulation was relatively scarce and often signaled something important: food, danger, or social interaction. As a result, we developed what neuroscientists call a novelty bias. Our brains are hardwired to pay attention to what's new and different in our environment. This made perfect sense in a world where new stimuli were rare and often survival relevant. This novelty bias served our ancestors well for hundreds of thousands of years. But in today's world, where novelty is constant and infinite, this same mechanism works against us. Each notification, email, or social media update triggers a small release of dopamine, one of the brain's pleasure chemicals. This is the same neurotransmitter involved in eating delicious food, experiencing physical pleasure, or even taking certain drugs. Dr. Anna Lemke, a psychiatrist and addiction expert at Stanford University, explains that our smartphones and digital devices have essentially become portable dopamine pumps that we carry with us everywhere. Each time we check our phones and find something novel, a new like, message, or piece of information, our brains receive a small hit of dopamine. This creates what neuroscientists call a variable reward schedule, the same mechanism that makes gambling so addictive. Sometimes we check our phones and find something rewarding, sometimes we don't. But the unpredictability actually makes us check more frequently, not less. The dopamine hit we get from checking our phones creates a powerful reward loop. Feel bored or uncomfortable, check phone, receive dopamine reward, repeat. Over time, this trains our brains to crave distraction rather than to resist it. We're not just being interrupted, we're being conditioned to interrupt ourselves. This conditioning happens at a neurological level. When we repeatedly pair the action of checking our devices with the reward of dopamine, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with this behavior. The brain literally rewires itself to make the distraction-seeking behavior more automatic and harder to resist. This explains why simply trying to focus harder often fails. Willpower alone can't overcome a brain that's been biochemically rewarded thousands of times for seeking distraction. It's like trying to diet while surrounded by your favorite foods that you've been conditioned to crave. The problem isn't a lack of discipline, it's that we're fighting against powerful neurochemical mechanisms that have been deliberately reinforced. Yes, deliberately. It's important to recognize that many digital products are specifically designed to exploit these vulnerabilities in our attention systems. As former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris has pointed out, there are thousands of engineers whose job it is to make products as addictive as possible. They use sophisticated techniques drawn from behavioral psychology to keep us engaged, scrolling, and coming back for more. Our attention has become the product being sold to advertisers, and companies have powerful financial incentives to capture as much of it as possible. Understanding this mechanism reveals something counterintuitive. The path to better focus isn't about eliminating distractions. It's about reducing the overall level of stimulation our brains receive. We need to lower the baseline of stimulation so that our brains don't constantly crave the dopamine hits that come from distraction. When our brains operate at a lower stimulation level, they don't crave distraction as intensely. This is why activities like meditation, time in nature, or even boring tasks can actually improve our ability to focus afterward. They recalibrate our stimulation threshold. This is also why many successful writers, artists, and thinkers deliberately create low stimulation environments for their work, not just to avoid interruptions, but to reduce the craving for interruption in the first place. The science of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, offers hope. Just as our brains adapted to high stimulation environments, they can readapt to lower stimulation levels. But this adaptation takes time, typically about a week of consistently lower stimulation before we notice significant changes. This timeline aligns with research on vacation recovery, which shows that it takes about 8 days for stress hormones like cortisol to return to baseline levels. This explains why vacations often don't feel relaxing until several days in, and why digital detoxes can be so uncomfortable at first. Our brains need time to adjust to a new baseline of stimulation. During this adjustment period, we may experience withdrawal-like symptoms, irritability, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, and strong urges to return to our devices. These symptoms are temporary, but can be intense enough to derail our efforts if we're not prepared for them. The good news is that this adjustment period is temporary. Once our brains recalibrate to lower stimulation levels, focus becomes less effortful. We don't have to fight against the constant craving for distraction because the craving itself diminishes. Many people who successfully reduce their digital consumption report that after the initial adjustment period, they don't miss the constant stimulation at all. In fact, they find their previous level of connectivity overwhelming and unpleasant when they return to it. This insight shifts how we should approach productivity. Rather than adding more productivity hacks or tools to our already overstimulated lives, we might achieve better results by subtraction, creating space, reducing inputs, and allowing our brains to operate at a more natural rhythm. As the writer Nassim Taleb puts it, the greatest successes come from having the freedom to fail. Similarly, our greatest focus might come from having the freedom from constant stimulation. Neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley describes attention as having two components: enhancement, amplifying the signal we want to focus on, and suppression, diminishing the noise we want to ignore. Most productivity advice focuses on enhancement, techniques to boost our concentration. But in our overstimulated world, the suppression component may be more important. We need to get better at reducing the noise before we can effectively amplify the signal. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive tool for recalibrating our stimulation threshold: boredom. Far from being a state to avoid, boredom might be one of our most powerful resources for enhancing focus and creativity in the digital age. We'll look at how deliberately embracing periods of understimulation can reset our attention systems and unlock cognitive abilities that remain dormant in our hyperconnected lives. Chapter 3. The Power of Boredom. When was the last time you were truly bored? Not the kind of boredom where you quickly reach for your phone to scroll through social media, but deep, prolonged boredom where your mind has nothing to do but wander. For most of us, this kind of boredom has become increasingly rare. We've engineered it out of our lives with smartphones that offer endless entertainment in every idle moment. Waiting in line, check Instagram. Sitting on the bus, play a game, can't sleep. browse YouTube. We've created a world where boredom is optional, and most of us opt out at every opportunity. But what if boredom isn't actually a negative state to be avoided? What if it's a crucial mental process that we're systematically eliminating to our detriment? After my smartphone experiment, I became fascinated by this question. If reducing stimulation for a month had such profound effects on my attention and creativity, what would happen if I deliberately embraced boredom as a practice? To find out, I designed what might be the strangest experiment of my career. I would make myself deliberately bored for 1 hour every day for a month. Not just a little bored, but profoundly, excruciatingly bored. To ensure maximum boredom, I reached out to readers of my blog and asked them to suggest the most boring activities they could imagine. The responses were both creative and sadistic. Here's a sample of what I subjected myself to. On day 1, I read the iTunes terms and conditions from beginning to end. If you've ever clicked I agree without reading, and who hasn't, let me tell you, you're not missing much. Though I was surprised to find it's actually shorter and more readable than its reputation suggests. On day 4, I waited on hold with an airline's baggage claims department. This wasn't simulated, I actually called and waited. Pro tip, if you want guaranteed boredom, don't call reservations, call baggage claims. You'll wait for hours if you get through at all. On day 7, I watched paint dry, literally. I painted a small section of wall and then sat in a chair watching it. I even took photos every 10 minutes to document the thrilling process of evaporation. On day 12, I manually copied pages from the phone book. Remember phone books? They still exist, and they remain spectacularly uninteresting. On day 19, I counted all the zeros in the first 10,000 digits of pi. This was particularly mind-numbing, not only counting, but having to maintain enough focus to not lose my place while performing the most meaningless task imaginable. On day 24, I watched a clock tick for 1 hour. No music, no distractions, just the second hand making its endless journey around the dial. This was perhaps the purest form of boredom I experienced. Nothing to do but observe the passage of time itself. I completed 27 other similarly tedious activities throughout the month. The experiment was, without exaggeration, one of the most difficult things I've ever voluntarily done. There were moments when I seriously questioned my sanity and the value of this research. But here's the fascinating part. I observed the exact same pattern as during my smartphone experiment. The first week was excruciating. I felt restless, irritable, and had an almost physical craving for stimulation. My mind screamed for something, anything, interesting to engage with. But around day 8, something shifted. My brain began to adapt to this lower level of stimulation. The boredom became less uncomfortable, and I started to notice 3 remarkable effects. The same 3 I'd observed during my digital detox, but even more pronounced. First, my attention span expanded dramatically. After spending an hour watching paint dry, focusing on writing or reading felt effortless by comparison. Tasks that normally required willpower to complete now seemed engaging and even pleasurable. It wasn't that the tasks had changed. My threshold for what constituted stimulating had shifted. Second, my mind began generating ideas at an astonishing rate. During the boring activities themselves, my thoughts would wander into unexpected territories, making connections between concepts I'd never considered related. I started keeping a notebook nearby during my boredom sessions because insights would bubble up from nowhere. By the end of the month, I had filled nearly 40 pages with ideas for articles, books, and projects. Third, my future thinking expanded. I found myself naturally planning ahead, considering long-term goals and imagining possible futures. Without the constant pull of immediate stimulation, my mind was free to wander into the future, considering questions like, what do I want to accomplish this year? And how might my career evolve over the next decade? These observations led me to dig deeper into the research on boredom, and what I found was fascinating. Boredom isn't just the absence of stimulation, it's a distinct cognitive state with important functions. Dr. Sandy Mann, a psychologist at the University of Central Lancashire who studies boredom, describes it as a search for neural stimulation that isn't satisfied. When we're bored, our brains are actually in an active state of seeking engagement. This seeking state can drive us to either find external stimulation, like checking our phones, or generate internal stimulation, like daydreaming or creative thinking. In our technology-saturated world, we almost always opt for external stimulation. But when that option is removed, either by choice or circumstance, our brains turn to internal resources, activating what neuroscientists call the default mode network. The default mode network is a set of interconnected brain regions that become active when we're not focused on the external world. It's sometimes called our imagination network because it's associated with self-reflection, creative thinking, and mental time travel, thinking about the past and future. Research from the University of Southern California found that this network is crucial for consolidating memories, understanding others' perspectives, and moral reasoning. Yet it only activates when we're not actively engaged with the external world, precisely the state we're avoiding when we reach for our phones at the first hint of boredom. A 2014 study published in the journal Science demonstrated this connection between boredom and creativity directly. Researchers asked participants to complete a creative task after either a boring activity or an engaging one. Those who had been bored first came up with significantly more creative solutions. Why? Because boredom creates a mental space where our brains can make new connections. When we're constantly stimulated, our thinking tends to follow familiar, well-worn neural pathways. But boredom forces our brains to search for stimulation internally, activating regions associated with creative problem-solving and divergent thinking. This explains why so many great ideas come to us in the shower, while walking, or during other minimally stimulating activities. These moments give our default mode network a chance to activate and our minds a chance to wander productively. Mind wandering itself has gotten a bad reputation in productivity circles. We tend to think of a wandering mind as an unfocused one, but research from the University of British Columbia suggests that mind wandering serves essential cognitive functions. When our minds wander, they don't wander randomly. They tend to gravitate toward unresolved problems and future planning. This is why you might suddenly remember an important task while taking a shower, or solve a problem you've been stuck on while walking your dog. Researchers have found that our minds wander to 3 main temporal zones: the past, the present, and the future. But the distribution isn't equal. When our minds wander freely, we think about the past only about 12% of the time, often recalling useful information or experiences. We think about the present, usually current problems or situations, about 28% of the time. But here's the most interesting part. We think about the future a whopping 48% of the time. This future-oriented thinking is what psychologists call prospection, and it's crucial for goal setting, planning, and motivation. The remaining percentage represents thoughts that aren't tied to any particular time frame. This prospective bias explains why boredom can be so valuable for planning and goal setting. When we're bored, our minds naturally project forward, considering possibilities and making plans. This is precisely the kind of thinking that gets crowded out when we're constantly stimulated. Of course, not all boredom is created equal. Psychologists distinguish between different types of boredom, from indifferent boredom, relaxed, withdrawn, to reactant boredom, restless, aggressive, to apathetic boredom, helpless, depressed. The kind of boredom I'm advocating is what researchers call constructive boredom, a temporary state that leads to creativity and reflection rather than frustration or apathy. So how can we harness the power of boredom in our overstimulated lives? Do we need to stare at clocks or count zeros in pi? Thankfully, no. There are more practical and less torturous ways to incorporate constructive boredom into our routines. The key is to create regular periods of understimulation, times when you deliberately avoid reaching for external entertainment. Here are some approaches that have worked for me, and for others I've shared these ideas with. Take a boredom walk without your phone, or with your phone in airplane mode. Just walk without any input. No music, no podcasts, no audiobooks. Let your mind wander wherever it wants to go. Keep a small notebook with you to capture any insights that arise. Practice what I call shower thinking by extending your shower time by 5 minutes, using that time just to let your mind wander. Some of my best ideas have come during these extended showers. Create transition spaces between activities. Instead of immediately jumping from one task to another, take 5 minutes to sit quietly and do nothing. This not only provides a moment for boredom-induced creativity, but also helps your brain process and consolidate what you've just done. Try productive procrastination. When you're stuck on a difficult problem, instead of pushing harder or distracting yourself with social media, do something boring and repetitive like washing dishes or folding laundry. The combination of physical activity and low mental stimulation creates ideal conditions for insights to emerge. Implement a boredom hour once a week, a time when you deliberately avoid all forms of entertainment and stimulation. You don't have to do anything as extreme as watching paint dry. Simply sit in a chair and let your mind wander, or engage in a simple, repetitive activity like doodling or knitting. One of my personal favorite activities for inducing constructive boredom is knitting. It's repetitive enough to free my mind to wander, but engaging enough to keep me from reaching for my phone. I keep a notepad nearby because I invariably have ideas that I want to capture while knitting. Find your equivalent. Maybe it's gardening, walking, simple cooking, or even just taking a bath instead of a shower. The goal isn't to make yourself miserable with boredom. It's to create space for your default mode network to activate and your mind to wander productively. Even small doses of boredom can yield significant benefits for creativity and focus. In our culture of constant productivity and optimization, boredom has been vilified as wasted time. But the research suggests the opposite. Boredom is not wasted time, but necessary mental space. By engineering it out of our lives, we may be sacrificing the very cognitive processes that lead to our most creative insights and meaningful plans. As the philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote in his 1932 essay, In Praise of Idleness, a certain power of enduring boredom is essential to a happy life. Nearly a century later, this observation is more relevant than ever. In the next chapter, we'll explore a related but distinct mental state that I call scatter focus, a particular kind of diffuse attention that can be deliberately cultivated for creative problem solving and insight generation. While boredom creates the conditions for mind wandering, scatter focus is about intentionally directing that wandering toward productive ends. Chapter 4, Scatter. Focus, the hidden productivity tool. When we talk about focus, we typically think of it as a single state, the ability to concentrate intensely on one task while blocking out distractions. This kind of focused attention is what psychologists call spotlight consciousness, directing the full beam of our awareness onto a specific target. But there's another type of attention that's equally valuable, yet rarely discussed in productivity circles. I call it scatter focus, a state where we allow our attention to diffuse and our minds to wander, but in a semi-directed way. It's not the complete absence of focus, but rather a different quality of focus, more like a lantern that illuminates a broader area less intensely than a spotlight that illuminates a narrow area with great intensity. This distinction was beautifully captured by J.R.R. Tolkien when he wrote, "Not all those who wander are lost." The same is true of our attention. Sometimes a wandering mind isn't unfocused, it's differently focused, and this different focus serves essential cognitive functions. I first began to appreciate the value of scatter focus during my digital detox experiments. As my mind became less stimulated, I noticed that some of my best ideas and insights came not when I was concentrating hard on a problem, but when I was engaged in activities that required only partial attention, walking, showering, or doing simple household tasks. This observation led me to experiment with deliberately cultivating the state of scatter focus as a problem-solving and creativity tool. The results were remarkable. Problems that seemed intractable when approached with intense concentration often yielded to this more diffuse attention. For example, I had been struggling for weeks to develop a framework for a book I was writing. Despite hours of focused work, outlining, mind mapping, and structured thinking, I couldn't find an organizing principle that felt right. Then, one day, while walking my dog, with no particular agenda in mind, the perfect structure suddenly appeared in my mind, fully formed. The solution had been percolating below the surface of my consciousness, and scatter focus provided the conditions for it to emerge. This experience isn't unique to me. Throughout history, many of humanity's greatest insights have emerged not during moments of intense concentration, but during periods of relaxed, diffuse attention. Archimedes had his famous eureka moment while taking a bath. Isaac Newton formulated his theory of gravity while sitting in an orchard, observing falling apples. Einstein visualized his theory of relativity while daydreaming about riding alongside a beam of light. What these stories have in common is that breakthrough insights often come when we step away from direct focus on a problem and allow our minds to wander in its general vicinity. This is scatter focus at work. The science behind this phenomenon is fascinating. When we're intensely focused on a problem, we primarily engage what neuroscientists call the task-positive network, or the central executive network of the brain. This network excels at logical, sequential thinking and applying known solutions to familiar problems. But when we allow our minds to wander, entering a state of scatter focus, we activate the default mode network we discussed in the previous chapter. This network excels at making novel connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, accessing distant memories, and generating creative insights. Dr. Barbara Oakley, a professor of engineering and author of A Mind for Numbers, describes these two modes as focused mode and diffuse mode thinking. She explains that both modes are essential for learning and problem solving, but they serve different functions and operate in different ways. Focused mode is like a highway with well-established routes. It's efficient for traveling to familiar destinations, but limited in where it can take you. Diffuse mode is more like cross-country travel across open fields, less efficient, but able to reach places that highways can't access. This explains why we often get stuck when trying to solve complex problems through sheer concentration. We're traveling the same mental highways repeatedly, unable to find new routes. Scatter focus allows us to go off-road, discovering connections and possibilities invisible from the highway. Research from the University of California, Santa Barbara supports this idea. In a series of experiments, researchers found that participants who were given a demanding creative task performed better after a period of mind wandering than those who either worked continuously or were given an unrelated demanding task. The key insight is that scatter focus isn't just the absence of concentration. It's a different kind of mental processing that complements focused attention. We need both. Focused attention for executing known procedures and scatter focus for generating insights and solving novel problems. So how can we deliberately cultivate scatter focus as a productivity tool? Here are several approaches I've found effective. First, recognize that scatter focus requires the right conditions. Just as you wouldn't try to have a deep conversation in a noisy restaurant, you shouldn't attempt scatter focus in a highly stimulating environment. Create conditions of moderate stimulation. Not so boring that your mind goes blank, but not so engaging that it demands your full attention. Activities that work well for inducing scatter focus include walking, especially in nature, light exercise, simple cooking, gardening, cleaning, and other routine tasks that occupy your hands while leaving your mind relatively free. I call these movement meditations. Activities that combine physical movement with mental space. Second, prime your mind before entering scatter focus. Spend some time thinking directly about the problem you want to solve or the creative challenge you're facing. Don't try to force a solution, just familiarize yourself with the contours of the problem. Then let it go and engage in your scatter focus activity. This priming is crucial. Your mind won't wander productively in completely random directions. It tends to gravitate toward unresolved problems and open questions. By priming yourself with a specific challenge, you increase the likelihood that your scatter focus will yield relevant insights. Third, capture insights when they arise. always have a way to record ideas that emerge during scatter focus. This could be a small notebook, a voice recorder app on your phone, or even a waterproof notepad for shower insights. Yes, these actually exist. Ideas that seem brilliant in the moment can evaporate quickly if not captured. Fourth, alternate between focused and scattered attention. These two modes of thinking work best in tandem. Use focused attention to define problems, gather information, and implement solutions. Use scatter focus to generate insights, make novel connections, and overcome creative blocks. One effective approach is the focused diffuse oscillation technique. Work intensely on a problem for a set period, say 25 to 50 minutes, then deliberately shift into scatter focus mode for 10 to 15 minutes. Repeat this cycle several times. This leverages the strengths of both attention modes while mitigating their weaknesses. Fifth, practice intentional daydreaming. Set aside time specifically for constructive mind wandering. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and let your thoughts roam freely. If your mind gravitates toward worries or rumination, gently redirect it toward more productive territory, interesting problems, creative projects, or positive future scenarios. Sixth, use incubation periods for important problems. When facing a complex challenge, spend some time with it initially, then deliberately set it aside for hours or even days while you focus on other things. Your unconscious mind will continue processing the problem during this incubation period, often generating solutions that weren't apparent during conscious deliberation. The polymath Henri Poincaré described this process beautifully. The role of this unconscious work in mathematical invention appears to me incontestable. He noted that after working hard on mathematical problems without success, he would take a break and solutions would often come to him during seemingly unrelated activities. Seventh, pay attention to the temporal focus of your mind wandering. As we discussed in the previous chapter, our minds tend to wander to the past, present, and future in predictable proportions, with a bias toward future thinking. You can leverage this natural tendency by deliberately directing your scatter focus toward different time horizons for different purposes. If you're seeking creative inspiration, let your mind wander to the past, retrieving memories and experiences that might inform your current project. If you're planning or goal setting, direct your scatter focus toward the future, imagining possibilities and scenarios. Eighth, create a third space for scatter focus. This is a physical location dedicated to diffuse thinking, somewhere different from where you do your focused work. It could be a specific chair, a corner of your garden, or even a coffee shop. You visit solely for the purpose of letting your mind wander productively. By associating a particular environment with scatter focus, you create a contextual trigger that helps your brain shift into this mode more easily. Over time, simply entering this space will signal to your brain that it's time for diffuse attention rather than concentrated focus. Ninth, use physical movement to enhance scatter focus. Walking is particularly effective. A Stanford University study found that walking increased creative output by an average of 60% compared to sitting. But any kind of light, rhythmic movement can help induce the right mental state: swimming, jogging, cycling, or even rocking in a chair. 10th, practice what I call productive monotasking. Choose a simple, repetitive task that requires just enough attention to keep your conscious mind occupied while leaving your unconscious mind free to wander. Activities like knitting, drawing, coloring, or even playing simple musical patterns can create this state. I personally find knitting ideal for this purpose. It occupies my hands and a small portion of my attention, creating just enough cognitive load to prevent anxious rumination while leaving ample mental space for creative connections to form. Many writers, artists, and scientists have their own version of this practice. Einstein played violin, Darwin took daily walks on his thinking path, and Agatha Christie plotted her murder mysteries while washing dishes. The beauty of scatter focus is that it leverages the brain's natural tendency to wander. Rather than fighting against this tendency, as most productivity advice suggests, we can harness it as a powerful tool for creativity and problem solving. This doesn't mean we should abandon focused attention. Deep, concentrated work remains essential for executing complex tasks, learning difficult material, and bringing projects to completion. But by recognizing the complementary value of scatter focus, we can develop a more balanced and effective approach to productivity, one that works with our brain's natural rhythms rather than against them. In our culture's relentless pursuit of efficiency and optimization, we've come to view any moment not spent in focused productivity as wasted time. But the research on scatter focus suggests otherwise. Those apparently unproductive moments when our minds wander may actually be when our most valuable thinking occurs. As the poet Joseph Brodsky observed, boredom is your window on the properties of time that one tends to ignore to the likely peril of one's mental equilibrium. Similarly, scatter focus is our window on the properties of attention that our productivity-obsessed culture tends to ignore, to the peril of our creative potential. In the next chapter, we'll explore practical strategies for reclaiming our attention in a world designed to capture and monetize it. We'll look at specific techniques for managing digital distractions, creating environments conducive to focus, and developing daily practices that strengthen our attention muscles over time. Chapter 5. Reclaiming your attention. We've explored the science of attention, the power of boredom, and the value of scatter focus. Now it's time to bring these insights together into a comprehensive approach for reclaiming your attention in a world that's constantly competing for it. Let's start by acknowledging a difficult truth. We are living through what some researchers have called an attention economy. Our attention is literally the product being sold by many of the world's largest and most powerful companies. Every time you open a free app or website, remember that you're not the customer, you're the product. Your attention is being packaged and sold to advertisers. Former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris puts it bluntly, your attention is being mined. Just as the Industrial Revolution harnessed physical resources, the digital revolution is harnessing cognitive resources, specifically your limited supply of attention. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a business model, and it's extraordinarily effective. The average person now spends over 3 hours daily on their smartphone and checks it 150 plus times per day. We spend 50 minutes daily on Facebook alone. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once said that their biggest competitor isn't other streaming services, but sleep itself. The companies behind these products employ some of the brightest minds on the planet. Data scientists, psychologists, neuroscientists, and designers, all working to make their products as engaging and potentially addictive as possible. They use sophisticated techniques drawn from behavioral psychology, such as variable rewards, social validation, and the fear of missing out, to keep us scrolling, clicking, and watching. I don't share this to alarm you, but to emphasize that reclaiming your attention isn't just a matter of willpower or better habits. You're up against systems specifically designed to capture and hold your attention. This is why simple advice like, just put your phone away, often fails. We need more sophisticated countermeasures. The good news is that once you understand how these attention-capturing systems work, you can develop effective strategies to counter them. Here's a comprehensive approach based on both research and my personal experimentation. 1. Perform an attention audit. Before making changes, understand your current attention patterns. For 1 week, use an app like Rescue Time, Moment, or Screen Time to track how you spend your digital attention. Don't try to change your behavior during this audit. The goal is to establish an accurate baseline. Pay attention to which apps and websites consume most of your time. When during the day you're most likely to get distracted, how often you check your devices, what triggers your checking behavior, boredom, anxiety, notifications, etc. This data will reveal your personal attention patterns and help you target interventions where they'll have the greatest impact. When I performed my first attention audit, I was shocked to discover I was checking my phone an average of 137 times per day and spending over 4 hours on it, despite considering myself relatively disciplined with technology. The data doesn't lie. and it can be a powerful motivator for change. 2. Engineer your environment. Willpower is a limited resource. Rather than relying on it to resist distractions, change your environment to make distractions less accessible and focused work more natural. Start with your physical space. Create different environments for different types of attention. Designate a specific area for deep, focused work that's free from distractions. This could be a particular desk, room, or even a specific chair. Over time, your brain will associate this environment with focused attention, making it easier to concentrate when you're there. Similarly, create a designated space for scatter focus, somewhere comfortable where your mind can wander productively. This separation of spaces creates contextual triggers that help your brain shift between different attention modes. Next, engineer your digital environment. The goal is to increase friction for distracting activities and decrease friction for focused ones. Some effective strategies include: remove social media apps from your phone, accessing them only through a browser. Turn off all non-essential notifications. Use website blockers like Freedom, Cold Turkey, or Leech Block during focused work periods. Organize your digital workspace to minimize visual clutter. Set up your devices with separate profiles for work and leisure. Use grayscale mode on your phone to reduce its visual appeal. I found that increasing friction even slightly can dramatically reduce distracting behaviors. For example, simply moving social media apps off my home screen and into a folder on the second page reduced my usage by over 60% without any additional effort. 3. Implement attention boundaries. Just as physical boundaries protect physical spaces, attention boundaries protect mental spaces. These are rules and practices that define when and how you'll allow your attention to be captured. Start by establishing technology-free times and zones in your life. These might include the first and last hour of your day, no devices before breakfast or after dinner. Meal times, no phones at the table. Certain rooms in your home, like the bedroom or dining room. 1 day per week as a digital Sabbath. My wife and I implemented a simple rule: no phones in the bedroom. This single boundary improved our sleep, our morning routines, and even our relationship, as we now start and end each day with genuine connection rather than digital distraction. Next, create communication boundaries. The expectation of constant availability is a modern phenomenon that severely fragments attention. Counter this by establishing specific times when you'll check and respond to emails and messages, communicating your availability clearly to colleagues and friends, using autoresponders to manage expectations during focused work periods, batching communications rather than responding to each message as it arrives. Finally, implement cognitive boundaries, practices that protect your internal attention landscape. These include meditation and mindfulness practices that strengthen attention control, regular periods of boredom and scatter focus, information diets that limit consumption of attention, fragmenting content, journaling to clear mental clutter before focused work. 4. Master attention management tools. While I generally advocate for simplicity, certain digital tools can actually help protect your attention rather than fragment it. Consider incorporating these into your attention management system. Pomodoro timers to structure focused work and breaks. Text expanders to reduce repetitive typing. Password managers to eliminate the cognitive load of remembering passwords. Note-taking systems that externalize information so your mind doesn't have to hold it. Calendar blocking to dedicate specific times for different types of attention. Single-purpose devices, like e-readers, that do one thing well without distractions. I've found that using a physical timer for Pomodoro sessions is more effective than a digital one, as it creates a tangible reminder of my commitment to focused work without introducing another screen. 5. Develop attention rituals. Rituals are powerful because they bypass the decision-making process that often leads to distraction. By establishing consistent patterns, you reduce the cognitive load of choosing to focus. Create transition rituals that help you shift between different attention modes. A starting work ritual that might include clearing your desk, closing unnecessary browser tabs, setting a timer, and taking 3 deep breaths. An ending work ritual that helps you mentally disengage, such as writing down your first task for tomorrow and physically shutting your laptop. A digital detox ritual for evenings, like placing your phone in a specific drawer or box. Develop maintenance rituals that keep your attention systems functioning optimally. Weekly reviews to assess how well you managed your attention and adjust accordingly. Regular digital decluttering sessions to remove apps, unsubscribe from emails, and curate social media feeds. Attention recovery practices like nature walks, meditation, or complete disconnection. I've developed a simple evening ritual that signals to my brain that work is done. I write down my 3 most important tasks for tomorrow, shut down my computer, not just sleep mode, and make a cup of herbal tea. This consistent sequence helps my mind transition from work mode to relaxation mode. 6th practice attention training. Just as physical exercise strengthens your muscles, certain practices can strengthen your attention. These include mindfulness meditation, which has been shown to improve attention control and reduce mind wandering. Reading physical books for progressively longer periods. Single tasking deliberately, even when multitasking seems more efficient. Attention endurance challenges, like gradually increasing your focused work sessions from 25 to 90 minutes. Practicing what Cal Newport calls deep work, cognitively demanding tasks performed without distraction. I started with just 5 minutes of meditation daily and gradually increased to 20 minutes. The improvement in my attention control has been remarkable, not just during meditation, but throughout my day. Research from the University of California found that even brief meditation training, 2 weeks, can significantly improve focus and memory. 7. Harness social support. Attention management is easier with support. Our social environments powerfully shape our behavior, often without our awareness. Consider these approaches. Find an attention partner with whom you can share goals and progress. Join or create a focus group that works together during designated times. Make your attention goals public to increase accountability. Establish shared norms with family and colleagues about device use and availability. Model healthy attention habits for others, especially children. I meet weekly with 3 friends for what we call deep work sessions. We work in the same space, completely focused for 90-minute stretches with short breaks between. The social accountability makes it much easier to maintain focus than when working alone. 8. Develop a healthy relationship with boredom. As we discussed in Chapter 3, boredom is not an enemy to be avoided, but a state to be selectively embraced. Developing comfort with boredom is perhaps the most powerful attention skill you can cultivate in our hyperstimulating world. Start small. Wait in line without checking your phone. Sit in a waiting room, device-free. Take a shower without playing music or podcasts. Drive short distances without audio entertainment. Eat a meal without any form of distraction. Gradually increase your boredom tolerance until you can comfortably spend extended periods with minimal external stimulation. This practice directly counters the conditioning that drives compulsive phone checking and media consumption. After 6 months of regular boredom practice, I can now sit comfortably in an airport for hours without digital entertainment, something that would have been almost painful before. This isn't deprivation, it's liberation from the constant need for stimulation. 9. Embrace selective ignorance. In an age of information abundance, knowing what to ignore is as important as knowing what to consume. The most focused people I know practice what I call selective ignorance, the deliberate choice to remain uninformed about certain topics. This doesn't mean burying your head in the sand about important issues. It means recognizing that you can't possibly process all available information, so you must choose carefully what deserves your attention. Consider limiting news consumption to specific times and sources, unsubscribing from low-value information streams, newsletters, podcasts, social media accounts, defining clear criteria for what information is worth your attention, practicing the art of saying, "This isn't for me," without FOMO, fear of missing out. As author Nassim Taleb notes, to bankrupt a fool, give him information. In a world drowning in information, curation becomes a crucial skill. 10. Develop an attention philosophy. Ultimately, managing your attention isn't just about productivity, it's about living intentionally. Develop a personal philosophy about what deserves your attention and why. Ask yourself, what are the most important areas of my life that deserve my best attention? What values do I want to guide my attention choices? What kind of relationship do I want to have with technology? How does my attention management reflect the person I want to be? Your answers will form a compass that guides your decisions when new attention-demanding technologies and situations arise. My own attention philosophy is simple. I want my attention to align with my values. If I value deep relationships, creative work, and personal growth, then my attention should primarily flow to these areas rather than to passive consumption or digital distraction. Putting it all together, the Attention Reset Protocol. If you're feeling overwhelmed by digital distraction and want to recalibrate your attention systems, consider implementing what I call an Attention Reset Protocol, a structured approach to breaking old patterns and establishing new ones. Here's a simplified version you can adapt to your needs. Phase 1. Preparation. 1 week. Conduct an attention audit to understand your current patterns. Identify your key attention drains and triggers. Set clear intentions for how you want to use your attention. Prepare your environment by removing or limiting access to major distractions. Inform friends, family, and colleagues about your plan. Phase 2. Reset. 2 weeks. Dramatically reduce digital stimulation. I recommend limiting smartphone use to 30 minutes daily and eliminating social media completely. Implement daily periods of constructive boredom. Practice scatter focus for at least 30 minutes daily. Engage in attention training through meditation and single tasking. Keep a journal, documenting changes in your attention, ideas, and insights. Phase 3. Reintroduction. 1 week. Selectively reintroduce digital tools based on their actual value to your life. Establish clear boundaries and rules for each tool you reintroduce. Create rituals and systems to maintain your recalibrated attention. Continue practices that support healthy attention, boredom, scatter focus, etc. Phase 4. Ongoing maintenance. Weekly attention reviews to assess and adjust your system. Monthly digital minimalism days. Quarterly. Deeper resets if needed. I've guided hundreds of people through versions of this protocol, and the results are consistently transformative. The initial adjustment period can be challenging, even uncomfortable, as your brain adapts to lower stimulation levels. But by the end of the reset, most people report significant improvements in focus, creativity, and overall well-being. One participant, a software developer named Michael, described his experience this way. The first 3 days were awful. I felt anxious, restless, and even had headaches. But by the end of the first week, something shifted. My mind felt clearer than it had in years. I could actually sit and code for 2 hours straight without feeling the need to check anything. And I started having ideas again. Real, original ideas. Not just reactions to what I was consuming online. The deeper purpose. Attention as a path to meaning. As we conclude our exploration of focus, I want to address the deeper question. Why does this matter? Beyond productivity and performance, why should we care so deeply about how we manage our attention? The answer lies in the relationship between attention and meaning. What we pay attention to literally becomes our life experience. As philosopher William James noted, my experience is what I agree to attend to. When we allow our attention to be continuously fragmented and captured by the loudest, flashiest stimuli, we experience life as similarly fragmented, a series of shallow interactions, partial experiences, and fleeting impressions. We become spectators rather than participants in our own lives. But when we take control of our attention and direct it intentionally toward what matters most to us, deep relationships, meaningful work, personal growth, natural beauty, creative expression, we experience life as richer, more coherent, and more meaningful. This is why the battle for your attention is ultimately a battle for your life itself. It's about choosing the quality of your limited time on this planet. I've seen this transformation in my own life. Before I began this journey, I was constantly busy, but rarely satisfied. I consumed enormous amounts of content, but created very little. I was connected to hundreds of people online, but often felt lonely in real life. My attention was fragmented, and so was my experience. Learning to manage my attention hasn't just made me more productive, it has fundamentally changed how I experience being alive. I'm more present with the people I love, I'm more engaged in my work. I notice beauty in everyday moments that I previously would have missed while staring at a screen. This doesn't mean I've achieved perfect attention management, far from it. I still struggle daily with the pull of digital distraction. I still have days where my focus is scattered and my mind restless. The difference is that I now have tools, practices, and awareness to recognize when I'm off course and find my way back. The journey to better focus isn't about achieving some perfect state of constant concentration. It's about developing a more intentional relationship with your attention, one that aligns with your deepest values and supports a life of meaning and purpose. As you move forward from this audiobook, I encourage you to see attention management not as another self-improvement project, but as a fundamental life skill. Perhaps the fundamental life skill for the digital age. In a world of infinite distractions, the ability to choose what you pay attention to is the ability to choose your life. Start small. Be patient with yourself. Expect setbacks and adjust accordingly. Remember that you're working against powerful forces designed to capture your attention, so celebrate even modest victories, and most importantly, keep the bigger picture in mind. The goal isn't just to be more productive or less distracted, it's to be more fully alive, more deeply engaged with what matters most to you. In the words of Mary Oliver's beautiful poem, The Summer Day, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Your attention is how you spend that life. Choose wisely. Conclusion. We've covered a lot of ground in this audiobook, from the neuroscience of distraction to practical strategies for reclaiming your focus. Let's take a moment to review the key insights from each chapter. In Chapter 1, we explored how our modern digital environment has created unprecedented challenges for our attention, leading to fragmented focus and constant distraction. We saw how my personal experiment with limiting smartphone use revealed 3 significant benefits: improved concentration, increased idea generation, and enhanced future thinking. In Chapter 2, we delved into the science of attention, discovering that the root problem isn't distraction itself, but overstimulation. We learned how the brain's novelty bias and reward systems create a craving for distraction that can't be overcome through willpower alone. Instead, we need to reduce our overall stimulation levels to recalibrate our attention systems. In Chapter 3, we examined the surprising power of boredom as a tool for enhancing focus and creativity. Through my month-long boredom experiment and research on the default mode network, we saw how creating space for our minds to wander can lead to valuable insights and more effective planning. In Chapter 4, we introduced the concept of scatter focus, a diffuse attention state that complements deep focus and serves essential cognitive functions. We explored how to deliberately cultivate this state for creative problem-solving and insight generation. And in Chapter 5, we developed a comprehensive approach to reclaiming our attention in a world designed to capture it, from environmental engineering to attention training to developing a personal attention philosophy. Through all of these explorations, one central theme has emerged. Attention is not just a productivity resource, it's the substance of our lived experience. By reclaiming control of our attention, we reclaim control of our lives. The challenges we face are significant. We're living through an unprecedented experiment in human attention, with more sophisticated competition for our focus than ever before. The attention economy isn't going away. If anything, it will become more pervasive and more sophisticated. But I remain optimistic. As our understanding of attention grows, so does our ability to manage it effectively. The very technologies that fragment our focus can also be harnessed to protect it. And as more people recognize the value of reclaiming their attention, cultural norms will slowly shift to support rather than undermine focused thought. The future belongs to those who can manage their attention. In a world of increasing distraction, the ability to focus deeply, think clearly, and create meaningfully will become ever more valuable, both economically and personally. I hope this audiobook has provided you with insights, tools, and inspiration for your own journey toward better focus. Remember that this is not an all or nothing proposition. Even small improvements in how you manage your attention can yield significant benefits in your work, relationships, and overall quality of life. As you move forward, be gentle with yourself. We're all navigating these challenges together, learning as we go. There will be days when your focus is sharp and days when it's scattered. The goal isn't perfection, but progress, gradually developing a healthier, more intentional relationship with your attention. Thank you for your attention throughout this audiobook. In a world where attention is increasingly scarce and valuable, I'm honored that you've shared yours with me. Now go forth and focus on what truly matters to you. Your journey to better attention begins with a single moment of awareness. And that moment can be right now.